So let's just now turn our attention to the suprarenal glands and their anatomy. Well, they have a cortex and they have an inner medulla. We can see that each of the suprarenal glands is going to be positioned on the kind of supromedial aspect of the kidneys, and they are surrounded by a substantial amount of perinephric fat and the renal fascia, but they're separated from the kidneys by this fibrous tissue. So there is a separation. The right suprarenal gland is triangular in shape. It's in contact with the IVC medially, and the liver is laterally found. The left suprarenal gland is more semilunar in shape. It's related to the stomach, spleen, and the pancreas. Two parts of the suprarenal glands, and they have different embryological origins. The outer cortex releases corticosteroids and androgens. This essentially causes the kidneys to retain salt and water. That's going to have the effect of increasing the blood pressure. The inner medulla is actually derived from the sympathetic nervous system. It was part of the sympathetic nervous system as it was developed, and it releases adrenaline, which supports that fight or flight response. So the inner medulla of the suprarenal gland is really an extension of the sympathetic nervous system. So it's involved in the fight and flight response. The vasculature of the suprarenal glands is complex, and essentially there are about 3 arteries that supply each of the suprarenal glands. It's a highly vascular organ because it's endocrine in function, releasing hormones into the bloodstream. And in total, there's about 50 or 60 tiny branches coming from these 3 sources. We have, if here's our suprarenal gland, we can see here on the supramedial aspect of the kidney, and here we can see the aorta. We have 3 suprarenal arteries, a superior, a middle, and an inferior. The superior suprarenal artery comes from what's known as the inferior phrenic artery. The inferior phrenic artery is a paired artery, a left and a right one of those paired visceral branches giving rise to the superior suprarenal arteries, that goes to supply part of the diaphragm and the body wall. Along its path, it gives rise to these superior suprarenal arteries that come down and supply the suprarenal gland. We also have middle suprarenal arteries, and these can come directly from the aorta. So middle suprarenal arteries coming directly from the aorta. Sometimes, because the celiac trunk would be located around here, these arteries can also come from the celiac trunk, but the middle suprarenal arteries. And then we have the renal artery, which we know about, going towards the kidneys. Along its course, it can give rise to the inferior suprarenal artery, and that ascends up towards the suprarenal glands. So it has these 3 main sources, superior, middle, and inferior suprarenal arteries. And together, these will give a whole series of smaller branches totaling 50 to 60 arteries, indicating its function as an endocrine gland. Venous drainage is a lot more straightforward, and it's by the way of large suprarenal veins, and these can drain into the IVC directly or via the renal vein. So we can see the suprarenal veins draining either into the renal vein here, which will go into the IVC and then up, or it can drain into the inferior vena cava itself. So we can see the vasculature of the suprarenal glands is really complex.